this year to the OECD Global Forum on Competition for its 24th edition. In our agenda today and tomorrow, we're going to cover 5 topics, really. We'll have a discussion on the competitive impact of artificial intelligence on downstream markets, after having had a number of discussion on AI sector itself. Second, we are going to have an extensive look at issues of competition in the healthcare sector. Third, we will have tomorrow morning a discussion on competition law enforcement in the informal sector, an issue which is certainly very present in many developing countries, but also in developed countries. We will have next an exchange on how competition authorities balance priorities. And finally, we will have the peer review of Kenya, which will be led by the president of CAGE from Brazil, the competition commissioner of South Africa, and the acting director general of DG Comp. So we have a very interesting and diverse agenda today. I want to remind everyone that this opening session is open to the public through the webcast. And before we exchange on the important topics that I've mentioned, I want to express my personal gratitude to Secretary-General Cormann for being with us today and having accepted to deliver some opening remarks, and also to Teresa Ribera, Executive Vice President for a Clean, Just, and Competitive Transition and Competition Commissioner, who is with us for having accepted to give the keynote speech of this forum. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor on to Secretary-General Cormann.
Well, thank you very much, Chair of the Global Forum on Competition, Frederick, Jenny, and Executive Vice President Teresa Ribera. Thank you so much for joining us, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends all. A very warm welcome to you all to this Global Forum on Competition. I mean, it's fair to say that since its first edition back in 2001, this forum has grown into the leading global platform for dialogue on global competition policy. From 50 delegations, which were meeting back in 2001, to well over 100 competition authorities and international organizations here today, a very warm welcome to you all. In parallel, I think it's fair to say that competition policy has become a core part of the economic toolkit for governments around the world. Since 2001, jurisdictions from Argentina to Kenya, from the Philippines to Moldova and Saudi Arabia have adopted competition laws and established competition authorities. In fact, 10 of the 66 jurisdictions covered in our competition trends database have had competition authorities created over the past 20 years, so relatively recently. Resources for competition enforcement and advocacy are also on the increase, have increased and continue to increase. The latest edition of our OECD Competition Trends Report, which we're launching today, shows that average real competition agency budgets, that is adjusted for inflation, have increased by 38% over the past decade. Our ability to analyze competition dynamics has also increased, and the evidence in investigations has become more sophisticated and data-driven. The competition authorities now use dynamic models that assess long-term impacts on innovation and market evolution, rather than relying solely on static price effects. Authorities have also developed new tools, including market studies to better understand competitive dynamics, and AI technologies to manage case documents or analyze transaction-level data. Our analysis shows that by 2023, about half of OECD competition authorities had established a specialized data unit, and 40% had appointed a chief data officer. The OECD and this forum have been and will continue to be your partner in this journey, providing evidence-based policy analysis and advice to help ensure competition policy adapts to evolving the market condition and also remains as relevant, as effective and as impactful as it possibly can be. So first, on merger review frameworks, effective merger control can be a powerful tool to protect consumers, preserve incentives for efficiency and innovation, and ultimately encourage economic growth. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here in making that point, but nevertheless, this means not just remedying or prohibiting anti-competitive mergers, but also clearing beneficial mergers that create economies of scale, enable innovation, or boost supply chain efficiency, following thorough but efficient analysis. Merger activity, and as a result, the workload of competition authorities has grown significantly over the past decade. For example, among the 59 jurisdictions for which we have data, annual merger notifications increased by about 20% over the past decade. And as I'm sure you're all very aware, despite the increased volume of transactions to review, competition authorities have kept up their rigorous scrutiny, intervening at a relatively constant rate of around 4 to 7% of mergers per year. These efforts have provided valuable experiences, enabling peer learning on what works and what doesn't in merger control, from procedural tools to economic analysis and remedies. Drawing on these experiences shared right here at the OECD, the revised OECD recommendation on merger review, adopted in June this year, provides competition authorities with practical guidance on clear, transparent, and publicly available rules and criteria for notification thresholds and review procedures, principles to ensure that merger analysis is effective, including by relying on appropriate methodologies for assessing merger effects, the design, assessment, and adoption of merger remedies, cooperation between reviewing jurisdictions on remedy design and implementation in transnational mergers, and the ex-post assessment of merger decisions and remedies. Second, on antitrust enforcement. Effective enforcement remains at the core of the mandate of competition authorities, and it is essential for both addressing and deterring anti-competitive conduct. But our data shows that antitrust enforcement has been on a downward trend over the past decade. That the number of competition enforcement investigations, for example, reached a peak between 2015 and 2017 and has since fallen by around a third for both cartels and abuse of dominance. In parallel, leniency applications across 46 jurisdictions with available data also fell by 35% over the past decade. The causes of this trend can vary across jurisdictions, which each have their own case history and level of experience. On the positive side, it may reflect stronger deterrence effects following high-profile enforcement actions and greater awareness among businesses of competition laws. However, it may also signal challenges in our competition frameworks, including shifting priorities away from enforcement as authorities balance resource constraints and new responsibilities in digital markets, and the growing complexity of antitrust cases as investigations increasingly involve sophisticated data analysis or complex theories of harm. So this year's forum will be an opportunity to share and to exchange views on these potential causes and ways to, I guess, make sure that we get the balance right when it comes to the level of enforcement activity. Third, on understanding and addressing competition concerns related to AI. AI can increase the productivity of firms by accelerating decision-making processes, or increasing labor and automating tasks. It can also strengthen competition by cutting down intermediary costs and equipping consumers with better information on available products and services. But we're not yet fully harnessing the potential of these technologies across all firms and sectors, and there are real potential competition policy implications from the rate and the pace and the extent of diffusion of AI in a very differentiated way, not just between economies, but also within economies. For example, our data shows that large firms are currently more than twice as likely to adopt AI than small and medium-sized enterprises. And widespread AI adoption depends on competitive markets that promote innovation, affordability, improved capability, and better quality AI models, as well as meaningful access for downstream users and innovators. In contrast, the emergence of entrenched market power could lead to AI being developed in closed ecosystems that prevent the development of innovative new firms and products. Competition agencies have an important role to play on this front in keeping markets for AI tools competitive, affordable, and accessible, but also to reflect on the competition policy implications of differentiated access and participation in the AI opportunities. This includes conducting market studies to gain deep insights into AI-driven market dynamics and identify potential competitive harms. Meanwhile, governments should prioritize the development and promotion of common standards and interoperability frameworks. Such standards and frameworks can help prevent market fragmentation, reduce entry barriers, and foster a competitive and innovative AI ecosystem. So in conclusion, the competition policy community has achieved a great deal over the past 2 decades, but there is always more to do, and the economy continues to evolve. And this forum is a great platform for you to exchange on the opportunities and the challenges that you face at this point and looking forward. The strength of this forum lies in its diversity of jurisdictions, of experiences, and of perspectives, as well as the shared commitment to improving competition policy for the benefit of consumers and markets around the world. So my very best wishes, Frederic, and colleagues, for a productive, forward-looking and stimulating forum over these next few days. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a few words at the outset.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary-General, for being with us, and also for your introductory comments. You left us with a question mark on which I think that we should work on in the coming years and months. Is the decline in the long trend decline in enforcement, is it bad news or is it good news? You left open the possibility that there were 2 competing explanations for this. So I think that this is something that both at the level of statistics and data that we should reflect on to try to see how we could test what is the reason for this decline, whether it means that we have been very actively involved in promoting a competition culture, and whether that competition culture has developed over time, or whether it means that we're facing particular challenges that we didn't face before. I would now like to give the floor for her keynote speech to Ms. Ribera. And I also want to note that I'm particularly happy to do this today, because if I'm correct, this is exactly 1 year since you've been since the commission has been installed and since you've been commissioner. So it's also an anniversary. You have the floor.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yes, it's true that dear Secretary-General Cormann, President Jenny, colleagues, it is my great pleasure to be here to celebrate our first anniversary of this commission together with you, which explains why I was not able to come last year, but I am very happy to join you this year. It is absolutely true that this is a stronghold of multilateralism in a changing world, and we need to keep on working together. I was telling to the Secretary-General Cormann, I appreciate very much this house. This is a house that, like in the case of the European Union, was born at the end of World War II. So to identify how we could work together based on cooperation, discussions, debates, sound information to boost development, prosperity, and peace all over the world. And this is still the case. 25 years ago, we initiated a great adventure to work together as part of this spirit. This forum has brought together over 100 authorities and experts from all continents of the globe with a simple purpose: to make markets work for people. You were introducing comments on how mergers, antitrust, the use of subsidies eventually in some of our constituencies, the evolution of markets are important, and we need to pay attention to the real economy to see how they work. In the landscape, we identify new challenges: sustainability, the green agenda, the power of the digital markets, and even the artificial intelligence that are shaping markets very differently from what it was not so far ago. And yes, it is true. Part of our mission is to ensure a proper enforcement of the rule of law, of the specific regulation that is being adopted in our different nations and constituencies and jurisdictions, but also a better understanding of the policy challenges that make us think on how we can assess the different circumstances to identify the positions in the markets, the harm theories, or the eventual abuse of dominance. Doing so, we help protect the democratic spirit that sits at the heart of the competition policy. The idea that no economic power should become so dominant that people lose choice or voice. And yes, we may wonder to what extent the decline in the enforcement is good, bad news, or a combination of a little bit of both. But it is interesting to see how things have been evolving in the last decades, but how we foresee the time to come. As enforcers, we help shape markets that reward effort, creativity, and fairness. Markets where business can succeed on merit and not on privilege. Markets that support innovation instead of blocking it. But none of this happens in isolation. Competition authorities operate inside real societies with real pressures and real expectations. Societies facing rising costs, shifting technologies, artificial intelligence threats, climate change, and even opportunities. We can't ignore those pressures. They shape how markets function, and they shape what people expect from us. Our role is to stay connected to those realities, to understand them, to answer our decisions in the world people actually live in, to protect and promote competition in the public interest today and for the future. We know that major global shifts are reshaping markets everywhere, and they demand competition authorities to be flexible and forward-looking. And citizens are concerned about issues that touch their daily lives: access to healthcare, affordable housing, high-quality goods and services, clean air, low energy bills, fair opportunities, not being blocked or biased because of the access to digital markets. These are measures by which people judge whether markets are working for them or whether they are facing new challenges that could undermine their capacities to decide and live. Competition authorities must remain responsive. We need to understand the pressures people face and ensure our policies protect their access to essential goods and services and foster fair economic opportunities. But we know that one size does not fit all. This is because competition policy must be adapted to local realities. As the ones responsible for our respective jurisdictions, it is essential that we listen, discuss, and exchange ideas. But at the same time, we cannot copy-paste models without considering livelihoods and social fabric. That ensures that our decisions are grounded in society, sensitive to local people's needs, and designed to support fairness, inclusion, and sustainability. And this is how I understand our mission: to make change work for open, fair, and people-centered markets. In the European Union, competition enforcement remains independent, rules-based, and grounded in evidence. Our procedures take time. It is to ensure that we protect the rights of all parties. It is ultimately because our decisions are subject to judicial review that we know that they can be fair and challenged. They can deliver. European citizens have entrusted us with one important mission: to maintain a level playing field where business competing on merit and benefiting society can thrive. When defending being independent, we mean resisting pressure from anyone while staying focused on the public good. In every decision, we are mindful of the economic and societal context in which business operates. That is why the ongoing policy reforms such as the revision of the merger guidelines or the updates to the antitrust procedures, are more than automatic technical updates. They may take time. They may be improved. We want to listen to everybody and to be sure that whatever response we may come with is sound. They are about keeping competition policy effective for citizens, ensuring markets stay open, curbing abuses, and supporting innovation that benefits all. Competition authorities worldwide face very similar challenges, preserving independence while remaining connected to the daily lives of citizens, while taking decisions based on data. This is a shared responsibility. We must reaffirm our commitment to the principles at the heart of competition, fairness, openness, and accountability. We stand alongside other authorities in this mission, whether enforcing antitrust rules, guiding legislative reforms, or supporting new frameworks for fair competition in digital markets. Around the world, we see efforts to adopt rules similar to the European Union's Digital Markets Act, giving clear guidance for competition in digital markets and ensuring innovation benefiting society. We remain committed to supporting other authorities' efforts through knowledge sharing, collaboration, and mutual learning. In this way, we can strengthen the impact of competition policy in the digital sector for citizens globally. Competition law is not a tool for controlling markets or advancing narrow economic interests. It is an essential pillar, as I said, of open, fair, and sustainable markets. It should never be a bargaining chip in trade negotiations or a tool for protectionism. Its purpose is to safeguard citizens' welfare and strengthen economies in a socially and environmentally responsible way. And for this, international cooperation, dialogue, and a strong commitment to multilateralism are essential. This forum is an ideal platform to reflect not only on what competition law is, but to foster multilateral cooperation for the benefits of all our citizens. By working together, sharing experiences, and learning from each other, we can ensure that competition policy supports economic resilience, competitiveness, and social progress around the world. In this process, competition policy must stay true to its mission. Since 2001, this OECD Global Forum on Competition has been at the heart of this collaboration, and I'm sure that we are still identifying new challenges in the landscape, in the horizon, how we can relate our single markets, our domestic markets, to the external policies, how we can continue to inspire learning, innovation, and shared commitments to fair, sustainable, and accountable markets. So let's be sure that we take full advantage of this annual opportunity to exchange views, to learn from each other, and to identify the new challenges ahead of us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Vice President Ribera, for those thoughts and for a combination of important points that I thought you made, one of them being that competition law enforcement and competition policy have to be adapted both to the realities and the expectations, in fact, that one has about competition policy. And second, for reminding us that there is a close link between the development of competition and the multilateral system, not only because the multilateral system helped a lot of countries move towards more competition, but also because the trade negotiations were based on the idea that more competition would be mutually beneficial to all. That leads me to ask you two questions, if you allow me. The first one is going back to what I said at the very beginning. You've been in your position for 1 year now. Retrospectively, what do you see as, in the context of the European Union, as having been the main enforcement wins to promote the idea, the agenda of a clean, just, and competitive transition? We are going to have tomorrow a discussion on how competition authorities managed different priorities, and we do know, if we think, for example, about climate change, that occasionally, particularly when consumers are not willing to pay for cleaner technology or cleaner products, there may be a tension between the goal of promoting clean technology and competition. So have you been confronted with those issues, and what have been, in your experience as commissioner, what you think are the main wins to promote your agenda?
Thank you, President, for the question. I guess that this is something that is broadly shared by many national competition authorities. To what extent we can make rid of our set of rules, which is our framing context as enforcers, to ensure that the level playing field takes place, when we know that in many boards, this green agenda is part of the strategic decision. So it's also part of the competition powers between the different players in a given market. On one side, what we have done this year is to identify how we can come up with upfront guidelines. Whenever any member state, any public authority wants to support a quick transformation of the industrial base, it can be done in a non-distortive context. So how we could address this criteria dealing with the clean industrial deal stated framework. At the very same time, we know that both in mergers and the antitrust decisions, we need to pay attention to what it means, cooperation or cartels to be avoided. So when it may make sense to count on a safe space to facilitate a common procurement, for instance, for green electricity imports, that could make sense to create these leading markets that can make a difference, but in a transparent way. So not distorted when compared to other decisions. Or to what extent we may be thinking on how to reflect in kind when thinking about the merger guidelines to be adopted. These are challenges that are part of our discussions today. And I think that it requires a very open conversation with the different enforcers in other jurisdictions, but also with the key players that are part of these markets in order to prevent any type of distortive, non-desired effect when adopting these policy guidelines to be followed by whoever wants to get into this market. I could say that this is part of what we could identify as relevant information. There is another ongoing discussion which is also very important, which is the access to relevant information for investors playing or taking decisions in the market. To what extent counting on sound information on the risk of liability, on the eventual profits, on standardization of this information to facilitate well-informed decisions is also relevant for the level playing field in the markets, and not just as a, differentiated access to this information to take decisions for any given investor wherever it goes. So I think that we will see more about this in the time to come, how we can prevent the lack or distortive access to information depending on the availability of this in different jurisdictions, or how we could facilitate the safe space for cooperative approaches that otherwise could be considered as something distorting the market functioning.
Thank you very much. If I follow what you say with it, and I hope I'm truthful to what the idea is in what you just told us, cooperation is not necessarily always anti-competitive, or it may be anti-competitive, but may also help some development that we would call either efficiency, dynamic efficiency, or economic progress or contribution to, and we have to have an open mind, but in both cases, transparency is very important. Transparency on the part of the people who cooperate, but transparency also on the part of the competition authorities on which criteria and how they're going to use those. My second question is really based on my history. I spent quite a bit of time at the WTO at a time when the promotion of multilateralism was very much an important issue on the political agenda. You've alluded to the fact that the atmosphere has changed somewhat, and that there are some fears there that there may be some interference between the change in the trade perspective and the competition one. And one of the areas where I wanted to ask you what your feeling is, the idea is with respect to the DMA, which was considered to be an innovation, a useful complement to competition law, and also first, because the Commission was way ahead of other jurisdictions in setting up the DMA. And I wanted to get your sense of whether you think that the DMA can be an inspiration for other countries, whether you think that there are reactions, protectionist reactions that maybe lessen the impact of the DMA outside of Europe, or whether you're quite optimistic that this is a way with or a route which is going to be followed by a number of jurisdictions.
Thank you so much. If you allow me, I could make two comments, one in general terms on trade and competition, and another on the DMA and the digital markets regulation. On the trade and competition, yes, I think that this is an important issue that will keep on growing in the time to come. I think that it is quite important to stick to the rule of law and to ensure that we do not promote a race to the bottom, but how we can combine things in such a way that we do not weaponize our domestic regulations, and at the very same time that we ensure that, again, transparency could help into an increasing of the bar threshold in terms of sustainability, social concerns, and innovation and efficient use of resources, so that we avoid these difficult fights that we witness today. I think that this is important, and this interface between domestic markets regulation and external policies and trade has always been a relevant topic and still needs quite a lot of work, including, of course, political dialogue between the different governments, but being supported by the technical understanding of the different enforcers and regulators and data. On the second topic, the Digital Markets Act, I could say that this is something that was identified, 15 years ago? Yes, the digital economy is one of the most relevant drivers for growth, but also for accumulation of power in a given market. And because of the way it works, it is not so easy to identify the different jurisdictions, and it has not been so easy to identify the cooperation context to facilitate decisions that could cover worldwide markets. So 15 years ago, we decided to try to explore to what extent upfront regulation identifying the obligations, the rights, the transparency, the better understanding of the functioning of the different digital markets could help to count on effective, cheaper, because less expensive, and timely decisions to prevent abuses in the market. And we have done it in a very, again, transparent and open manner, taking into consideration all the possible means to cooperate and to learn from the different jurisdictions and enforcers on what it could mean, the adoption of such a regulation. And now we have ended the first years of implementation, enforcement of this regulation. And I could say that, yes, It allows us to take decisions in an effective manner, sooner, so to prevent the damages and to be much more effective and not through a long procedures under the antitrust regulation that may end with a decision once the markets the digital markets have already evolved. It does not relate at all on any type of trade defensive measure. On the contrary, it applies to the given market under our jurisdiction, which is very large in terms of the share in the profits of these companies, because these companies have evolved in a very successful manner, I would say. But we may be at the edge of risking no more innovation taking place because of the abuse of dominance, not only the market share, the relevant position in the market, but the abuse of dominance of these big companies. It is also very illustrative to see to what extent there's a large number of small startups coming from non-European jurisdictions, knocking on the door of the European enforcer to say we need that this space is open so that the newcomers could challenge the traditional incumbents. And it is also quite inspiring to see that there are many other jurisdictions that are trying to find how they can adopt similar regulation in these digital markets. So I think that with full respect of the rule of law, including those regulations under the trade toolbox, we may come up in an effective manner not to regret that we had a chance and we did not prevent this abuse of dominance or this evolution towards quite a few number of players in this very relevant, both economically and socially, markets in the time to come.
Thank you very much for this optimistic assessment of the developments. And somewhere you mentioned the fact that a number of other jurisdictions are thinking about ways that they could benefit, in fact, from the European experience. And so that's encouraging. Thank you very much. I know that you have a very heavy agenda, and I want to thank the Secretary General and yourself again very much for opening this forum. We are going to interrupt the proceedings for 5 minutes to allow you to leave, and then we will go on a topic which is related to what you were talking about, AI and its impact on downstream markets. So thank you very much again. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would take your seat, we are now going to start the first session And the first session of the Global Forum this morning has two items. Before we move on to AI and the discussion on its influence on downstream market, we are going to have a short presentation by the OECD Secretariat of the trends in competition law enforcement. You've heard from Secretary-General Cormann some of the figures that come out of this data source, but the competition division has been gathering a lot of information and following a lot of information. And Ora is going to give us a general view of what lessons one can derive from this very useful data source. So let me give the floor to Ora on the trend of the last decade in competition law enforcement.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, and thank you everyone for being with us today. As the Secretary-General just announced, I'm delighted to introduce the newly launched OECD Competition Trends Report, a decade of trends, data, and insights. I will just take a couple of minutes to walk you through the key findings. And if you want to explore further, please feel free to take a copy at the back of the room or access it online by scanning a QR code that will appear at the end of my presentation. Over the past decade, competition enforcement has been shaped by a series of profound macroeconomic and market shifts. The report mentions issues such as the COVID-19 pandemic disrupting supply chains and accelerating digitalization, the return of inflation, rising interest rates that have impacted market dynamics and investment patterns, and geopolitical tensions and complexities in global trade. At the same time, we highlight the emergence of digital platforms, AI technologies, and new business models that have challenged traditional enforcement frameworks. The fact that enforcers have shifted focus to issues in non-traditional markets, such as labor, environment, data-driven markets, as well as to review impact on innovation, dynamic competition, and other variables. Today, we wanted to explore how these developments have impacted competition enforcement by using the OECD Competition Trends database, because we believe that understanding the direction and intensity of competition enforcement requires sharing of experience, but also robust and systematic data. As a results-driven and evidence-based organization, the OECD recognizes that competition enforcement statistics provide an essential lens through which we can assess competition policy, where enforcement is being prioritized, whether the tools at our disposal are being used effectively. So today we are launching a special edition of the OECD Competition Trends Report. It's based on statistics from 66 OECD and non-OECD jurisdictions. Thanks to many of you who are here in the room for providing this data every year since 2015. This report marks 10 years of data on more than 30 variables that cover competition enforcement, going through resources, cartel and abuse of dominance activity, mergers, as well as market studies. So we wanted to use this opportunity to take a look at the entire decade rather than the year evolution that we usually do. As some of you may know, this report was usually launched during the OECD Competition Open Day, but we wanted to take the opportunity of having you all here as providers of this data to give you the key findings in the first place. This database is unique in size and scope, and while the report only presents aggregated results that may not fully reflect the reality of each jurisdiction in the sample, we believe that it does provide valuable insights into the overall landscape and can contribute for a better understanding of authorities' role in it. So I hope that it enables you as competition authorities to identify long-term patterns, assess responsiveness of your enforcement to emerging challenges, and better understand the overall landscape. As the Secretary General mentioned, this year's report reveals a mixed picture over the decade. Some key numbers in the report are in the screen right now. More than 95,000 mergers were notified during the decade. From all the mergers decisions, 98% correspond to unclear unconditional clearances, around 1.75 to mergers clear with remedies, and 0.25 of mergers prohibited or challenged, which in absolute terms represents around 230 mergers prohibited in 10 years. 65.5 billion were the fines imposed for anti-competitive conduct across the sample in the decade to more than 10,000 companies, out of which 4 out of 5 decisions were for cartels. And 4% was the annualized real growth of competition authorities' budget dedicated to competition, although, as I said, this masks heterogeneity across jurisdictions, of course, with some jurisdictions observing decrease in their budgets. But as you will see in the report, there are many, many key numbers that describe enforcement and competition authorities' activities in the past decade. The report observed that global trends in mergers and acquisitions in the past 10 years have been impacted by macroeconomic dynamics. The correlation between merger notifications and variables such as GDP growth, inflation, and interest rates seems to be strong. We observed that periods of strong GDP growth tend to spur deals, while periods of recession dampen them. And of course, the most impactful shock in the last decade was the COVID-19 pandemic, where OECD jurisdictions observed a decrease in their GDP of around 4.7%, which correlated with a drop in M&A activity in 2020 compared to 2019. Then moderated inflation and low interest rates may have also contributed to increase in M&A. Interest rate hikes in 2020 may have also had something to do with decreased activity observed in 2022 and 2023. So again, macroeconomic shocks, uncertainty, geopolitical tensions, and so on may have had an impact on the total mergers notified to competition authorities. At the same time, in periods where M&A activity increased, well, more mergers to assess require more time from competition authorities and more often a flexible allocation of staff from other enforcement areas. So it would be interesting to explore whether this also impacted activity in other areas of work of competition authorities. We observed that the majority of mergers assessed, well, of course, they don't have an impact on competition. However, despite increases of the levels of mergers notified in the last couple of years, what we saw is that competition authorities are maintaining relatively stable intervention levels. And this was mostly driven by an increase of mergers prohibited or challenged as a proportion of total decisions. During the 10-year period, 5 jurisdictions represented close to 45% of total mergers prohibited or challenged, but we also observed that at the end of the decade, more jurisdictions are challenging or prohibiting more mergers. Actually, 2024 was the year with most prohibited mergers, or both in absolute and relative terms, with 20 jurisdictions prohibiting at least one mergers or challenge one merger in the year. The report also reviews some qualitative aspects of merger regimes. I'm not going to stop there, but as the Secretary General observed, this also shows some alignment on procedure and aspects of merger characteristics across the sample, and this goes in line with the most recent revision of our OECD recommendation on merger review, which was revised by the OECD Council in June 2025. So it goes in line with authorities moving towards some areas of convergence in merger review and analysis. The report also covers market studies as one of variables to measure one side of authorities' advocacy efforts. In the past decade, authorities conducted more than 1,500 market studies with an average of 3 studies per authority per year. This number is relatively stable, which shows the continued relevance of market studies as an advocacy tool and a tool that authorities use to understand market dynamics. Clearly, here we're missing part of the picture. We are not here talking about quality of studies, but OECD work has revealed that authorities are increasingly having more powers and tools to conduct market studies, which positively impact the quality of their outcome. And in today's, actually, our working party on competition and regulation will meet to discuss market studies and other market analysis tools, which can give us a bit more information on the relevance, different type of studies that authorities are conducting and some developments in the area. So please stay tuned. But this slide shows that in 2024, the most common industries studied by competition authorities in the sample were retail trade, manufacturing, and information, which includes all the studies in digital markets. Now moving to enforcement. As the Secretary-General announced, the report observed that there has been an overall downward trend in some key measures. The report tries to go into potential explanations for this decline, but as the chair said, these leave us with more questions than answers, and I believe that forums like this Global Forum contribute to try to answer some of these questions, but we observe that some priorities are changing and some of them are beyond enforcement. Of course, there was a COVID impact during the decade which affected all these variables. We keep observing a decline in leniency applications overall. There's an increased complexity of enforcement cases and in different versions of the forum and the OECD competition committee meetings, we have discussed different topics that have to do with this increased complexity of enforcement cases. And another possible reason could be the increased deterrence following major cases at the beginning of the decade. Finally, the report discusses key metrics on resources dedicated to competition enforcement. So I'm not gonna give too much time on this because the report that we launched earlier this year in February has an in focus chapter dedicated to them. But this special edition, of course, highlights the overall increase in resources in the past decade and how recent developments in enforcement have also impacted the structure of competition authorities. So, for example, it shows how authorities have evolved, changes in their structure, internal organization in response to new challenges and new responsibilities, such as those brought by digitalization. So with these insights in mind, I encourage you to give a deep dive into the report, explore how other variables have evolved over the decade. And as the Secretary-General highlighted before, robust enforcement statistics are essential for understanding where authorities are focusing their efforts. We trust that the report continues to serve as a valuable resource in advancing this goal and guide informed decisions and strengthen the effectiveness of competition enforcement. And thank you again for being the source of this report.
Thank you very much, Aura, for this bird's eye view of the one can get from the data bank that we have. It's hugely important to keep it going, to be able to make comparison across time and across jurisdictions. And it requires a lot of activity on the part of the membership. So I can only emphasize how useful this work is. I have 3 quick thoughts, and then I will give the floor to Germany on what Aura said. One of the possibility why there's this increase in merger control could be that the scope of merger control across the world has increased. More countries have now merger control provisions and are using them. So it would be interesting to relate this with the number of countries that have a merger control regime in particular. The second point is that to emphasize the fact that I think that the competition community should try to figure out how come there's been a decrease in enforcement. Having a set of competition authorities whose budgets are increasing with a declining enforcement might send a signal if it's misinterpreted by others. And therefore, it's incumbent on us to try to see why. And one of the things which I noted was that with the decline in enforcement, there's an increase in the number of market studies. And that raises the possibility that it is the style of intervention of competition authorities which has changed rather than their level of activity. So we have various possible hypotheses. The good hypothesis, everybody has become conscious of competition and there are fewer violations. There's a negative one that we're just disinterested, but there's another one, which is the fact that we may be shifting our instruments. And the last one is the fact that I'm wondering whether there's an easy place for everybody to consult all those market studies. I suspect that in many of those market studies, there are things that could be used by other jurisdictions if they had access, and that they may be there as source of economy, really, if one could have access to those. So I don't know how that exchange of information is organized, but that could be useful. I see that Germany has its flag up.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Aura for presenting this report. We will digest it with great interest. I just wanted to add one thought in case it might be of interest, and that regards the number of merger notifications, because in Germany we have this discussion always to adapt the thresholds for merger notification. And there is a sense that for politicians, it can be very attractive as a means to reduce bureaucracy. If they say that we will adapt the merger notification thresholds, make it easier for companies, our reasoning is always, it depends on the whole framework. If the merger notification is simple, you don't have to change the thresholds because it's really important to have this information. And then you can, of course, exempt certain sectors. In Germany, hospitals was always a very, very important area of our enforcement work. And in parallel to the last prohibition decision, we noticed the merger control was basically abolished. So these political considerations might be of interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This maybe calls for a more extended discussion of the data, which is in the database. But thank you very much to the Secretariat for whetting our appetite on this and for the work that goes into keeping this data bank and extracting some of the trends. I think it's been very useful. We're going to stop for 5 minutes and we will resume literally in 5 minutes with the main item today on our agenda, which is the discussion of artificial intelligence and the competitive dynamics in downstream markets. So we'll meet again in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.